Oh, this is a big question from Richard Leonard, who emailed us this. On a recent pod, you discussed how the upcoming and most recent hosts of the World Cup all have reasons against them for hosting the tournament. The US, political and climate issues. Qatar, alleged human rights violations and climate, the same with Saudi Arabia. Russia, political issues. Given the overall cost of hosting the tournament and the size of the tournament going forward, realistically, what countries can afford to host the tournament where it won't end up as a white elephant like Portugal during Euro 2004 and Brazil during World Cup 2014, while also not being politically problematic? He goes on to ask, do you think that multi-country bids from smaller nations are the only solution going forward, even as far as Euro 2020's model across the continent, or do you think a fundamental change to global tournaments is required, and if so, what? It's a big question.
It's a great question as well. Thank you, Richard, for getting in touch. It is a really genuinely fascinating question, isn't it? Because the nature of the awarding of tournaments itself has changed. Not just so much the sort of destinations. It's become a very, very political thing. It always seems to be for some kind of shadowy reason we're not fully aware of. That it's
sports washing and all that.
Well, in absolutely, in some cases, yeah. Well, absolutely that, yeah. And you know, under Blatter, he did say that he wanted to take the game around the world, and I think as flawed as Blatter was, I think that there was truth in that. He was very passionate about taking the World Cup to Africa. And I think it was a good thing that they managed to get it out there. Obviously, South Africa is one of those places with lots of those white elephant stadiums. So I feel like this probably should be a return for a little while at least to countries that already have the infrastructure. And I know with the expansion of the World Cup, that limits those further. And there aren't going to be many countries where nothing is built to accommodate a tournament like this. Particularly, as I say, with the ever expanding size of the tournament, because I think, and I acknowledge that this is naive, but football and FIFA positions football as something that is a catalyst for positive change and for an example of just general sort of goodness in the world. And there is a sense that there's a fast fashion feel to a lot of tournaments now, with stadiums that come up and in some cases come down again, or the capacities are reduced, or they essentially just sit there being just not used at all, and it feels very, very wasteful. And we're at a point in human history where we need to be careful with that. We need to stop just kind of creating things for the sake of it and being quite wasteful in that sense. So I think, for a time, would it be the worst thing in the world if you look at France and you look at Germany, and the US is an example of it because they do have the infrastructure there. Brazil, and obviously Brazil has its issues with stadiums.
Difficult to start
and the state they're in, but it's a really, really interesting question, because actually when you start drilling down into it, there aren't that many countries where you think, you could do a tournament tomorrow, and it does feel to me like we need to return to that.
Yeah, I suppose to Richard's other point about countries that are politically problematic, I suppose more and more I think it feels like there are fewer countries that would fit the brief of having the infrastructure but not having the political history.
Yeah, I think it's tricky when you get into the politics.
Yeah,
I think
sure,
it's really tricky.
It is, and I think we shouldn't be afraid of doing so. But at the same time, I don't necessarily think there is a remedy in that getting smaller countries together to put on these tournaments so we don't have these problems. Because actually, depending where you're from, you can have a few issues with what Portugal historically has been up to and that kind of stuff.
This is what I mean.
Well, the difference though is that let's take Morocco and Saudi Arabia, which are two countries that members of the LGBT community would not necessarily feel safe in.
Yeah,
that's present, isn't it? That's something that actually, where they might be unsafe in the duration of the tournament, rather than something that's kind of historical. So I think that is something.
Yeah,
you can look
true.
at. You have to look at that and go, well, that's not right.
Well, I think that's, to me, that's the only thing where FIFA can sort of step in. I think the whole the political stuff. We spoke about the US and how people are being sort of detained. What the numbers are, I don't know, but it's quite alarming when you hear that about the US. But I don't think currently, I think anyone can guess my thoughts on the current administration in the US, I think it would be madness to say you can't have a World Cup because you voted for that guy personally. And this is where it gets really tricky, because then are you saying, Gianni Infantino, your politics should be this, and everyone in FIFA, you should... to me, that's just a minefield and you can't do it.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I actually think people agree with that.
Yeah, and I think as well, how we think... Or how, I say we, again, not everyone thinks it. How the three of us think in London, in England, in blah, 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 you get the picture. To say to someone from the other side of the world, well, I'm not sure of that leader, and da-da-da. But let me finish this. Where FIFA, I think, can step in is what you guys were just touching on there. And you say, if you don't create a tournament where everybody's welcome and everybody's safe,
and then people don't die making the stadium,
which is crucial, I was going to come on to that, then you can't have it.
Yeah.
That's fair.
Yes,
I think that is where FIFA could jump in. If FIFA say, well, you're not really economically liberal enough, or actually your minimum wage isn't, you can't get into all that. And I know they're sort of slightly,
FIFA do have that sort of power, but they're so incompetent in some ways that they allow countries to wield it rather than them using it themselves.
Well, I mean, yeah, and it. The corruption allegations and findings speak for themselves, but if you look at the previous ones, I mean, Qatar, when you're talking about waste and all that, I mean, they had to build all those stadiums, and it was such an enormous project. You then, if you're FIFA, you have to say, and this is where I think they can also step in politically. You have to say, right, well, what is your... Well, how are you going to do this? Because it's such an enormous project. Because how many people died? Hundreds, thousands of people died. An absolute disgrace. Disgrace is not even close.
There isn't really a word.
There isn't a word. It's a tragedy would be the closest thing. And that was the real kind of thing about that Qatar World Cup before a ball had even kicked. It was... Anyway, we can go over old ground, and sorry, I'll try and get back to this. I know what you mean, Jim, when you were saying about, if you have the infrastructure, but then it becomes a bit of a closed shop.
Well, this is the other problem, isn't it?
And this is why it's so tricky, because to say to other countries, no, you got crap stadiums, or you're not got enough, you can't do it. They go, well, hang on a minute. Well, if we get investment, and they could argue it that way, you have to. If a country does stuff, say take Brazil, if they go, no, we're going to do this, and they built the stadiums, and they improved everything, if you're FIFA... to sort of go, I'm not having that. I'm not sure that's your call, if you see what I mean. You've got to have guarantees that it's going to be good and it's going to be this. In terms of that country's finances and so on, that's not unfit. That's not open for the bid, if you see what I mean.
But do you not think so? But
it's so tricky, though.
But the problems that arose out of South Africa would have been avoidable had FIFA just been a bit more on hand with everything from the World Cup.
Yes.
Instead of just like, right, you build the stadium, brilliant, good enough.
Yeah, so they need to be a bit more hands-on, maybe.
Yeah. But almost like help the transition of kind of moving from, right, we'll take charge here to, okay, here's what you need to do. We'll check in with you every once in a while over the next decade or so to make sure these things are ticking over. But here's what you need to do to maintain, everything that you've put in place for our benefit here.
There is a process, apparently. When people go, I mean, you remember some of the FIFA delegates going over to Qatar going, well, I haven't seen any human rights issues. So,
No, I mean afterwards. I mean after.
Oh, it's like a legacy sort of thing.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, okay, yeah. So that's, you need to sort of tighten up and...
Maybe not so much like London 2012, but kind of like that. Not necessarily, so in that example, not necessarily the Olympic Stadium.
Yes.
But if you actually look at the things around it, whether it's the velodrome or the swimming centre or the aquatic centre, all that stuff has a bit of legacy behind it and has been, still used to this day.
But I think it's incredibly difficult. I mean, if you've got Soccer City Stadium in Johannesburg, which was 70,000 or 80, whatever the capacity, like how do you hope everybody turns up and watches your national league? You don't even have to go that far. Portugal, 2004, you had these, massive stadiums built and only, a handful of teams kind of maintaining that, I suppose. So I think it's incredibly difficult. And to give you an example of how things have changed over the years and why these conversations are really, really quite pertinent now is, in the 1998 World Cup, France hosted it. And France can host a massive tournament, as they have done a few times since, the country that missed out by 5 votes to them to host that tournament was Morocco. Now, Morocco will be a host at the 2030 World Cup along with Spain and Portugal. I know there's few matches in South America, but they're the main hosts. And you kind of go, oh, right, yeah, okay. In the Euros in 2028, it'll be the UK and Ireland that are hosting it. And I think that's what you're going to see. We've seen it before. Yeah. Belgium and the Netherlands, Ukraine and Poland.
And I think
Japan and South Korea. And I think you're going to have to do that because of the expanded bloody... There's so many more games and teams
now. It's the practical thing to do, isn't
totally.
It? And I think actually that does lead to some potentially quite fun scenarios. We've got this strange scenario in Euro 2032 of Italy and Turkey.
That's which is
kind of weird.
I didn't see that one coming up.
Yeah, I mean, Turkey probably could host a tournament on its own, you would think. Big, huge country, lots of infrastructure there already because football's so massive.
But do they fancy it? And that's the other thing. That's the other issue, is that when you see all this, I mean, look, I personally thought China were going to get the 2034 World Cup, and clearly they've thought to themselves with regard to the political stuff. My take would be is that they've looked at what happened with Qatar, with a lot of journalists asking very important questions and a lot of negative press, even though they got a lot of positive stuff from other places. And I think they've probably thought, I don't think we fancy that.
Yeah.
I honestly, that would be, I'm sure other people have said that as well. It's maybe not the hottest of takes, but that's what you would think. But if you start going on about, well, which countries are rich enough, which countries are big enough, who's got the infrastructure, you whittle it down quite a lot. And then it becomes like it used to be, very Eurocentric.
Yeah.
And to go back to old Blatter, I think there was a purity about what he wanted to do.
Just clearly, generally you think that, don't you? You think he was just a squeaky clean individual.
I will defend that man no more. But no, I think that, taking...
He can't help you now, can he?
Taking the World Cup around the globe, there is, I get it.
There's a romance to it.
There is a romance to it.
In an ideal world, it would go off without a hitch, wouldn't it? And it would be a carnival and a festival of football, but it's more complicated than that.
And the Russia World Cup, when it was given to Russia, it was a bit like, was it, the reason why there was controversy over that is because it wasn't marked as high as some of the other bids, like the England bid or the sort of Iberian bid or one or two others, wherever it was. But when it was given, it was okay. And then, of course, subsequently, things happen and you look at what's going on now. So it's difficult to say, political issues, because, Trump and co could be impeached, or they could be, or they could, or there could be election. Or I know there won't be before, but you know what I mean. So that sort of stuff, I think you've got to be incredibly careful, and I don't think FIFA have an appetite at all. And I kind of understand to a very obvious extent why, but there are definitely things that they have to put in place because they have enough examples now, or really the Qatar example is there. Is this going to be safe for everybody? Are we going to have, because, you can't have a World Cup where, as you say, people think, well, hang on a minute here. And are we going to have human rights violations which are just off the chart for this kind of thing?
It's a shame that bar, which should be so low, just hasn't been cleared so frequently. If we can kind of address another part of the question about places that you can see a World Cup happening in the future, I think there's a couple of potentially exciting ones. Australia have wanted it for a while, and I think that would be really, really interesting. Yep. I think that'd be great. Completely different part of the world,
and it would have to be
explored
during our summer, so it's not as warm there, and maybe England players.
Calendar-wise, that's great as well, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
From a selfish perspective,
I want it more in the southern hemisphere for that reason.
And Australia do sport brilliantly.
They do. Yeah. I've not been there, but you don't need to go there to know that. Yeah.
So I think that's a perfect host.
And
Australia.
A Nordic contingent as well. Again, you'd probably have to have Norway, Sweden, and Finland. Possibly
Here we go.
Denmark
Take a jumper.
In the summer though.
Yeah.
Do you know what though? I don't think they'd have the stadiums for it.
Even across the country.
No, not the kind of size of stadium. I mean, I don't think there isn't one stadium in. I wouldn't have thought that there's many or any stadium which is sort of 60,000 plus capacity.
Yeah, they might have to get building, and this is the problem, isn't it?
And if there is, sorry, maybe there's an oversight there, but yeah, and that's what I mean. It's very, very difficult. I think a British bid, or if it goes well, a British and Irish one. I think that would be. I think the Euros would be great in 2028 there. But again, you're going back to Europe and so on. I mean, other than Australia, I mean, where we haven't seen it before, it really is a difficult one.
Yeah. Although I suppose part of that comes from how you don't want to repeat kind of tournaments. I'm sure, surely Mexico could host it on their own. I'm very passionate that Mexico is the most World Cup country, of course.
Not with 48 teams though, Jim.
No, maybe not.
You couldn't have it. And I think Richard is saying, with the multi-country bids, you could have like an Eastern European one with a number of countries around there.
What needs to happen is that FIFA need to build their own country in the sea.
Now we're talking.
And that will float around the world.
Yep.
And that will be a football country basically, just for World Cups, and you use that every time.
Yeah, but you only use it when it's outside the sun. When it's on the northern hemisphere, essentially.
Very much at night time.
Sorry, southern hemisphere. Southern hemisphere summers.
I thought you meant just in the middle. It's a sleepy World Cup. It's at like 2 a.m, but like local time.
Yeah, right.
Every game. Great question, Richard. I'm sure a lot of people have big opinions on that. So hopefully we managed to answer it somewhat satisfactory. All right, let's have a quick break and then more of your questions.
Yeah, and I know we're not experts. We're not doctors. We're not scientists. But
welcome back to Football Ramble, everybody.
So, on the last episode of the Mailbag, we had a great chat about which players we think will define the 2020s when the decade is over. And Smiley Face followed up on X saying, similar to the question around marquee players of the decade, do you see anybody other than Pep Guardiola and Carlo Ancelotti as the standout managers for the 2020s?
It's a good question. I mean, Carlo is very much... it's been a sort of...
Carlo straddles the decades, doesn't he?
Yeah, exactly.
As does Guardiola, really.
So I don't know if that'll be seen as his best period. I mean, maybe, although, I mean, Milan Carlo, even though he wasn't as successful, is the one I would tend to kind of starry-eyed...
for the Ancelotti heads.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. But, Guardiola, I mean, again, he's just stand-up manager, whichever decade he's operated in, which is currently 2. Luis Enrique.
3, really?
3, yeah. Luis Enrique.
I would say Luis
Good
Enrique
shout.
as well,
Is-
especially now that he's obviously recently won that second treble, which tells its own story.
Yeah, because I think with the first treble, people will look at Messi, Suarez, and Neymar as the front.
Unfairly.
Very unfairly.
Your team are only good because of the players, isn't it?
Seems
harsh.
They were good players. So, yeah, I think people don't look at the manager for that one in the same way they would look at Guardiola, despite his amazing side.
I think that was a fallacy, though, and I think we're now seeing the truth of that.
Okay.
That Enrique is obviously he's a top-tier elite manager.
Because he could be at PSG for a few years now, and they really could, the next 2 or 3 years, they could win back-to-back Champions Leagues, or they could do stuff that we've never seen them do before. So I think, and as well, just how impressive they were. That final performance against Inter, that goes down in history as one of the best performances.
It's the highest scoring, isn't it?
It's magnificent. When Champions League
era
history, era, yes. So I think he'd be the only one, really. I would think.
Can you put Klopp in there?
No,
or do you think his achievements were sort of stacked towards the
2010s,
the last decade?
2010s, I would say, with Klopp, and he is one of the defining managers of that period. But for me, he achieved stuff in the 2020s. For me, vintage Klopp is back then.
Simeone, just the stubbornness, the barnacle-like quality of just sticking around.
Yeah, again, 2010s for me. I think that it's the decade is we're halfway through it, and as I say, other than the renaissance of Carlo Ancelotti and Pep Guardiola sort of carrying on doing his thing and winning a treble with Man City. I think that's the difference. I think, again, Guardiola, I would look at the 2010s as his kind of golden period. But having won that treble with Man City, he's one of the defining managers of that decade as well, of this decade.
I'm going to throw a name in there at you.
Mikel Arteta.
Not Mikel Arteta.
Roy Hodgson.
Not Roy Hodgson either. But there was a time when Nathan Jones' Luton Town had the best XG in Europe. And that has to count for something, does it not?
It has to, Vish.
I mean, I was going to say Xabi Alonso, but Nathan Jones works as well.
Yeah, I mean, Alonso's achievements are incredible.
Okay, there you go. That's an answer.
It's frustrating that they only lost one game in that season, and it was obviously the...
To Adamola
Lookman.
But he's got the other half of the decade to do things with Real Madrid, doesn't he?
Absolutely.
Exactly.
I actually read this question more as like someone who could put an imprint on the game, not necessarily like collect a lot of trophies.
Mm-hmm.
And so while I had Alonso as my answer, I was also wondering if actually when you manage Real Madrid, if you are influential in that way, I don't think you are. Mm-hmm. I think you're basically picking up trinkets and that they boost legacy of the team, the players, and the manager without necessarily affecting like how football is played. You don't really go into trends. I see like what Enrique is doing at PSG is like not a trend setting, but he's taking an existing trend and elevating it to a certain degree.
Yes.
Obviously, there's Guardiola's work speaks for itself. Ancelotti, similarly, with the Real Madrid thing, is a little bit different because it's you're a calming influence in a in an organization that's quite chaotic. You're the if Tim from The Office was in Succession, that's Ancelotti at Real Madrid.
Yeah.
But yeah, like so with Alonso, I was thinking, I think has a trophy,
I think it's a good
can
shout.
do the back end, and will obviously spill over into that next decade. In terms of like another manager, there's some like this is a much lower level.
Don't say Ange.
No, but I think of someone like we had this conversation before about English managers and how. There aren't any elite English managers, but there is a generation of like young, up and coming English or British manager. And I'm not necessarily saying that they're going to make waves by the end of the decade, but I think the conversation might change a little bit between now and then, whereby someone like, if you go really low down, someone like Will Steele will be given like a big job. Someone like Kieran McKenna might be, similarly given a big job. Or someone like Eddie Howe in
locally,
the next couple of years.
Yeah. Locally.
That's what I mean. Yeah. But
Right.
Locally in the Premier League, because of the size of the league, they are big jobs.
Or you could say Will Steele wouldn't be maybe local to a few places.
Yeah, sure.
But
sure.
yes, I know what you mean.
Yeah, I mean, Howe has grown with Newcastle very, very impressively. And he does seem like he will inevitably be the England manager one day in the way that it's been a long time since an English manager has felt that way, isn't it? You're kind of scraping around a little bit.
Yeah.
But yeah, Howe absolutely, I think, is in it. And I also think Antonio Conte has won Serie A with Inter and with Napoli in this decade. And obviously the majority of his success again came in the previous decade. But I think that he's managed to do that with two separate teams. Possibly puts him in that conversation as well.
I wonder if the Spalletti renaissance, though, with Napoli would trump
That would be
Conte.
nice, because that is a great example of someone who has done it in two different eras.
Yeah, I mean,
That's quite nice.
In terms of international football, I think if they go on and really do something, i.e. win the next World Cup, I think Luis de la Fuente could be that. And I might argue that Lionel Scaloni, the Argentina manager,
Unfashionable.
Indeed, but Argentina had not won the Copa America.
A South American team had not won the World Cup to a point where it was starting to get like a bit desperate.
Yeah, because Brazil clearly weren't up, was struggling. Hence, they've turned to Ancelotti. So Messi wins the World Cup under Scaloni, who again emotionally just channeled all of that incredible passion, raw emotion into that tournament and wins it, and has won a couple of Copa Americas, which is no mean feat, by the way. And Argentina went a long time without winning it, of course. So he could be again in this country.
He has to be.
Yeah, he has to be. Yeah, you've got to think broader, haven't you? It's difficult to try and get, as I say, we were talking sort of local and more internationally. So I think there's some answers there, because with Scaloni and De La Fuente as well, the reason why I think they might be more relevant than you might initially think is because we're seeing, as we mentioned in a previous pod, it might have even been on the mailbag as well, the club manager going into international football. Those two are great examples of no, you've got to be the international manager. That's your job. And obviously England went close with Southgate, and those two give a great argument for that. Is you're not a club manager, you're an international manager for this particular. You're your football association's man, kind of thing. Excellent. Vish, you got the next question.
I do, and it comes from Tom Chittenden. On the topic of bad commentary, which seems to be at an all-time high at the moment, I was wondering what your favourite commentary teams were and your standout moment from them. You could also add your least favourite teams, but I could hazard a guess at who those are.
Yeah, I mean, I'll go first. Barry Davis and Trevor Brooking.
Yeah,
I remember.
that was mine.
Same, it was mine as well. And it's just a generational thing, but it's also a scarcity thing, isn't it? Part of the reason there's so much more, or it feels like there's more bad commentary around, is because there is simply so much more coverage of football now. So many commentators. And football used to be a treat when you saw it kind of live on TV, especially if you didn't have Sky as well. The tones of Barry Davis. I find myself thinking just the phrase, "Oh, Pat Bonner." It comes into my head all the time. No, it's not. It's a phrase to me.
Yeah.
If I open the cupboard and something drops out of it, even if it's not my fault, or I make some clumsy mistake, I'm like, "Oh, Pat Bonner," in my own mind, and it's just from that little moment, and again the scarcity.
Because he what Barry Davis was amazing at was he was in that moment. It's not, oh my goodness, what? I mean, that would be fine. Like again, it's not saying that commentators who didn't say that line or didn't do it like that are bad commentators at all. And to go, oh, what an error from Pat Bonner. He's cost them dearly, and now they're 2 down.
It's the emotion.
Exactly. It's indeed. He's he's completely entwined with the action. It's that emotional level that he's got.
Pat Bonner spilled a shot in a World Cup game.
In USA 94.
Yes,
for Ireland, Wim Jonk hit the shot. It was an easy one, and he just let it slip through his fingers. A really bad error, and it cost Ireland dearly, and they went out in the second round. Yes, for those who are wondering what on earth that was, well, I'm sure a lot of people do. But again, with Barry Davis, I've said it before, and I'll bloody well say it again, the Dennis Bergkamp goal against Argentina.
Oh,
beautifully
yeah.
Yeah,
and it was,
and the Dutch commentary on that was brilliant as well.
Yeah.
That inspired quite a few brilliant ones. But the emotion of that,
because again, you don't sometimes you don't need the stat heavy. Oh, what a goal by Bergkamp! It's his fourth goal. All that kind of stuff. What is the emotion that you're trying to get into? And obviously, these are huge
it's a big
moments.
deal. So you don't need to be formal about it. It's how it feels, right?
Yeah, and to be fair, I mean, I thought that Martin Tyler was a good commentator.
Yeah, I
actually.
think it became quite, not fashionable, but it became easy to bash him. But as he got older, he did become a bit more kind of doddery, I suppose, is the phrase.
I mean, but it's difficult.
I'm gonna say it.
Don't say it. Don't do it. No.
It was a bit.
No.
Martin Tyler and Andy Gray worked as a pair.
Unbelievable.
They did.
Get out.
I'll be honest with you, and this is not me.
Andy Gray is.
Didn't I tell you I had doubts about him?
I know he is a bell end, but they worked as a commentary duo.
I understand that you can separate the art from the artiste.
But Gray was excellent in that kind of second role.
I'm not just saying this to try and sound all
the
cool.
Conversations that you used to make up in players' head.
That was annoying.
I'm getting there. I'm heading
actually,
this
you know
in.
what? No, you're talking me out of your own point.
Yeah, exactly. I never cared for Andy Gray, I'll be honest.
Really? Okay.
Not really. No. I understand why some might. And it was a different time and blah, blah, blah.
But Andy Gray with Martin Tyler.
Yes.
I'm not saying that as in like, oh, I miss Andy Gray.
So with Andy Gray, I understand, again, that was the soundtrack of a lot of people's footballing viewing. And if you like it, fine. I know, I do get it, all sort of joking aside. I used to find him a bit annoying.
Again, yeah, fine.
But I recognise that he was a good co-commentator. That's just a stylistic issue that I wasn't in for, if you see what I mean.
Just on the question that I do want to pick up Tom on is there's a lot of bad commentary. Well, bad commentary seems at an all-time high because of the showcase Premier League games on Sky or TNT and the European games as well. There are loads of really good commentators out there.
There are, yeah.
I think of Matt Davies-Adams, who does a lot of Chelsea TV, but he also does a few bits here and there. Something that I've seen him on. I think he's brilliant. Adam Summerton, who does a lot of the Serie A on TNT, he's brilliant. I think his name's Seb Hutchinson, this Sky Sports commentator. Yeah, he's class. Good. There are loads of brilliant commentators out there.
Donald McNamara's brilliant.
Yeah, yeah. But that's before we even go into radio. There are loads of great commentators out there that you just don't really see them.
It's a stylistic issue that I think you're talking about. If you're a commentator, you're
spoke about how
competent.
Yeah, I'm sorry, very quickly. We spoke about how what companies seem to think we want from commentary has changed, and therefore it's changed, and we don't like it. Like the TNT podcast
Old
thing.
Men podcast at Cloud.
Yeah, yes, exactly, yeah. That is grating. But generally, I think around the houses, there are some really good commentators out there.
Well, in the 2018 World Cup, was it John Murray, or John Champion, sorry, with Ali McCoist?
Yes.
And that was lovely as well.
So they became a little bit of a kind of double act, didn't they, that people were very sort of fond of. And they did some stuff on Prime as well, so you didn't hear them that much, and it felt like a little bit of a treat. So I've actually got access to the longer version of Tom's email, and he said within that, personally as a 25-year-old, I grew up on Clive Tildesley on Champions League nights, and Wayne Rooney scored a goal versus Roma in a 7-1 win that is burned in my brain, etc., etc., etc. So he is someone who has very fond memories of Clive Tildesley, and there's been a lot of revisionism about Clive Tildesley because he was obviously ITV's main commentator for the Champions League. So he was very, very present. Like, everybody knew Tildesley, and people were really mean about him all the time.
Yes.
And like almost universally, the whole that magical night in Barcelona line he used to trot out, where he'd basically talk about Man United winning the Champions League in '99 as often as possible, and he did used to do that quite a bit. Legend. But actually now, lots of people are like, "Oh, he's an all-time great. He's one of the best ever to do it." And I find it really, really interesting how that's changed. And we've met Clive. He's a lovely guy. The level of prep he goes into is absolutely mad, and we're seeing that now because he's kind of opened that up on social media and shows how he does it. And he's obviously an amazing commentator. And I find it interesting that people are kind of harking back to that while forgetting that at the time, people just constantly criticised him.
It's kind of an Oasis arc, isn't it?
Yeah, sort of.
So, Tildo, get yourself out into those stadiums.
That magical night at Nebworth. You're as bad as him.
Tildo. What's wrong with that? Why is that the thing?
Tildo brothers.
Of all the things that's said in the studio, you let go. That's the thing you picked me up for.
He's opened up. He's showing us his prep. Tildo. Just.
Well, I agree with you, and I think that just people often moan. Again, it's like Jim. Clive Tildesley might have. Well, there's familiarity, but he also may well have said something which was slightly critical of a big team that a lot of people support in this country, and it may well have been fair comment. It might not have been. I don't know. It's a little opinion, and boom, his name is mud to all those supporters. But Tildesley, though, again, going back to the kind of overkill of commentators, because Peter Drury is one who was very popular when he was often on, say, like you'd see Europa League highlights.
It's an occasional treat. Right?
Exactly, it's an occasional treat. And now people say, "Oh, I'm not sure." I think Drury's a good commentator. But with Tildesley, that was it. With the Champions League nights, they were once every 2 weeks for a few month period, and that was that. That was often where you would hear him. People hark back. Oh, actually, no, that was quite good. Tildy also used to make a noise when a really, really good goal like smacked in the back of the net. You go, like that. And again, that was the kind of the emotion of it.
Yeah.
And I agree with you. I think with commentators, I think some people can be a bit harsh, and they don't know what they've got till it's gone. But there are a few styles that I would say nowadays that I wouldn't mind to see the back of.
Yeah.
Which
I would also say for the Club World Cup yesterday for PSG against Atletico Madrid, the co-commentator was Rob Green, who's one of those players who famously didn't actually really watch football or have much interest in it, and he is far superior to Rio Ferdinand. Far superior.
I think it's time for a break. See you in a minute.
Danny has been in touch on X, and he asks, for your own teams, which of your goalkeepers would you play outfield, and which outfield player would you put in goal? Can be current or ex-players.
Get Jordan Pickford on the pitch as an England fan. Get him out on pitch.
Where are you playing him?
Everywhere.
Come on.
I would play him up front.
Yeah?
Because I think he's got a good shot.
Got that left foot on him.
Yeah, he would be chatting away to those centre.
He'd be a nightmare. He'd be like Jamie Vardy.
He would be like Vardy. He would be.
Yeah,
I think he'd be quick as well, off the shoulder of the last man, cannon of a left foot, Pickford up front.
Pick up a lot of cards.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't mind that.
What about Andre Onana? Come on.
The first name that sprung to mind was Fabian Barthez.
Oh, yeah.
He was a very good ball-playing goalkeeper.
As Thierry Henry found out. They were teammates at France.
Yeah.
He also passed him the ball.
Yeah, he made a couple of mistakes. Definitely by the end, he made loads of mistakes.
He was a great goalkeeper.
He was a brilliant goalkeeper.
And I think we remember those mistakes. I mean, I've just done it.
Yeah,
but...
you know what? Barthez himself said of this exact situation where he'd get criticism for stuff like that. I should have been an outfield player because they don't get the same kind of microscopic attention to a mistake. And I love the confidence of him saying that. Because how many goalkeepers are that confident that they could have played outfield at the top level?
It would have been more confident if he said, after I won the World Cup, I should have become an outfielder.
The only thing I liked about going in goal is occasionally you should go behind the goal and have a piss.
Yeah.
Which he did.
Mad Jens Lehmann.
Yeah, exactly.
Lehmann as like a jobbing fullback would be good.
Yeah,
just
I
like
think so.
hacking the wingers.
Defensive midfielder, like destroyer.
Maybe.
Yeah, I mean, currently for Arsenal, David Raya would certainly play that position. Very, very good with the ball at his feet. Got a good passing range. You have him in a sort of Jorginho role.
Yeah.
You get some protection in there for him.
Who would you have in goal?
6'4", fond of a dive, Kai Havertz. He's got all the tools.
Yeah.
I was thinking a little bit more out of the box with this because he's not the tallest. Adama Traore coming for crosses, he's just cleaning everyone out.
Yeah,
Just absolutely barren. And also, if someone
through a defensive line, yeah.
Don't worry, lads, I've got this. And then
throw on him.
Yeah, exactly. The throw on him would be he would score.
He'd probably get more goals.
Yeah, that would test the law.
He'd just roll out to himself and run, wouldn't he?
Exactly. There's that, and also if a striker runs through on goal at him, just sprint top speed at the striker. Striker shit themselves.
And he could.
How terrifying would that be?
He could lob it out.
Yeah.
Sprint, catch up with his own throw,
volley it
and
in.
then miss it.
Yeah.
Has to pass it.
Yeah.
My outfielder going in goal is probably a bit controversial. Wayne Rooney.
No, I see that.
Rooney was a brilliant goalkeeper in training.
Why is that controversial?
Because you lose him from being outfield, don't you?
Yeah.
No, but you're Rooney now. Even though he's
quite the opposite, actually. Quite the opposite.
Does he not look agile to you? He scored at Soccer Aid.
He's only 5'9".
Rooney.
But genuinely, a very, very good goalkeeper.
Oh, getting stuck in.
There's loads of clips and training.
He'd punch a lot of forwards in the head and give penalties away.
So he had a reputation of going in goal and getting people to shoot at him and him loving that to the point that I think Sir Alex eventually banned him from doing that because it was just too much of a risk.
Yeah.
But also it was the crux of a Nike advert as well.
Oh, right.
I think it was one of the Joga Bonito ones where he's basically going in goal and then he dribbles, like it's in training for Manchester United, and then he catches a ball and then dribbles it from one side to the other and scores. It's a lovely lad. And Sir Alex Ferguson's in the advert as well, complaining that he's doing it. I'd go Rooney. Because obviously John O'Shea went in goal for Manchester United when a goalkeeper got sent off and there were no subs to be made. But Rooney for me.
How about for England, current players?
What,
You're
going in
looking
goal?
at Dan Burn, aren't you?
The big Dan. Oh, yeah.
Kyle Walker has been in goal.
Yeah, he's been in goal.
Yeah, and he's in the
And he
squad,
is a current England player. Is Jordan Henderson going to have to go? I'll go in goal. I'll stick around. Harry Kane went in goal.
He did.
He did, yeah.
He did let one slip under him. So
He's made up for that, though, isn't he?
I think so.
Not for me.
Who would be a terrible Miles Lewis-Skelly?
Yeah.
Yeah,
You're just going on the height.
yeah. Exactly that. Sean Wright Phillips, from picking older players.
They did say former player.
Yeah.
That's fine. Yeah.
Janino.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll all settle on
I'd say Vitinha, but he'd be brilliant, wouldn't he?
It would be, yeah.
Yeah, you'd like shoot in the top corner and he'd just be sat there be like, oh, that's mine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought of Edwin van der Sar playing up top. Ex-Fulham Man United goal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you remember him, I'm sure you do.
Yeah.
Yeah, fine. I just wanted to say he played for Fulham as well.
That's it, isn't it?
People forget.
You already had a Adama Traore. Throwing it to himself.
That was Jim's idea. Let's finish with this question from Josh Rowe on Instagram. If you could pick one manager from the Premier League to join the Ramble, who would it be and why?
It's actually quite a tough question, this, but I think a key part of being on this show is a healthy sense of self-deprecation.
Mm-hmm.
And I think only
say
Ruben
it.
Amorim fits that bill.
I knew you were going to say it. Put me out of a job. Just so we can like directly use the social content that we end up using.
Yeah.
It's too much that we've said.
source.
Yeah, exactly. We've relayed so many of his quotes. Just say it. Just look down the barrel and say it.
Yeah. Say it again, but slower. Amorim, yeah. I did think about this and I was like, it's not easy. I think Thomas Frank might be a bit of a laugh.
Yeah.
Be a bit punchy.
I think Frank's a really, really good shout.
I think him and Luke going at it would be quite enjoyable.
Yeah, I think Frank would probably be quite funny, which we obviously desperately need. So you can sort of drill down into that a little bit.
Talk to me about Vitor Pereira.
I was going to say him.
Yeah.
I think he's the best Ramble fit. I think
We'd have to record it in the pub though.
Yeah, because if a show goes well, do we have to go for a pint afterwards? Because that would get
100%,
quite draining.
First the pod, then the pints.
Yes, indeed. I also could listen to Daniel Farke all day.
Oh, I forgot about Farke.
I would want. I think my choice would be Pep because he'd be in here fuming that like football isn't funny. It's serious.
Yeah.
Stop laughing. Why do you keep bringing up Kevin Keegan? What's going on here?
Yeah.
He'd be livid.
He'd be like that that school teacher in Beavis and Butthead, and we'd be like Beavis and Butthead just giggling, and he'd be like shouting at us.
Or he'd like, he'd see like a rival pod. He'd get like Max Rushton around. Why do you keep posting that video of you in the pub when it's not you? You're much better than that. Like that kind of stuff. Like he did with Nathan Redmond.
Oh dear. I think we should finish there. Thank you very much for listening to the Football Ramble mailbag, part of the Eggcast.
I used to love you in Football Italia. What are you doing now? Stuff like that.
I'll be back with Luke and Pete tomorrow. How about that? Because there's more Club World Cup action.
Did you hear how excited he is to not be working with us?
You've had your fill. And so have I. Please do send your responses, opinions and questions for next week's mailbag and subscribe on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. See you tomorrow, everybody.